Hey, what's up, everybody? Michael Richards here with Elite Athletic Performance. Going to go over one of my favorite topics today, why your team is always hurt and why their conditioning levels suck. So stick around, should be a good one. So as always, who am I? Michael Richards. I'm the owner at Elite Athletic Performance in Benton, Arkansas. You can check out our website if you care about my background. If you don't have to, but we don't have to spend any time on it in this video. So the things you need to know there, and yes, I realize if you are a strength coach watching this, that they're not gears, they're pathways. Save your lectures for somebody who cares. I'm trying to help people understand how this works. Like a vehicle, your body cycles through gears as the speed and the length, the duration of the exercise, the movement continues. So that's kind of similar to a car. Unlike a vehicle, your body is paying attention to which gears are used most, and it is making arrangements for that gear to be more efficient. You know, basically you have 3 gears. All right, first gear, the red right there, that is where those blips right there, each one of those little increments represent a second. Okay, so first gear is like 10 to 15 seconds depending on the athlete. Don't get caught in the weeds on that, it doesn't matter. Okay, second gear is after that. It's after your 15 seconds or up into about a minute, and it's not that cut and dried, but just so you can understand what we're talking about. And then 61 seconds of your heart rate being or 61 seconds until your heart rate gets back to normal, you are in third gear. So how did we get here? We got here because, one, the amount of misery an athlete is in is being used as the main barometer for coaches to judge whether or not they got good work done. And that is a very flawed, faulty system, okay? It is super flawed. I think sometimes there is ego involved, but I think sometimes people just, honest to God, don't know any better, so that's what they look for. It's kind of like muscle soreness. Are you sore? Okay, it was good. If you aren't, then it wasn't, and it doesn't work that way either. So the other way that we've gotten into this is what I call the conditioning loop, okay? So, and this happens with parents too of younger kids, and hopefully they're watching and I'll be able to help some people with that too. So the conditioning loop is you're watching your athlete or your athletes perform, and we're usually talking about baseball, but this goes for all sports, short of triathlons and cross country and things like that. You're watching your athlete perform. They're running out of gas. If it's a pitcher, they're running out of gas in the 4th. You want them to last to the 6th or go a complete game or whatever. Or in hitters and position players, they're gassed when they get to second base after legging out a double or whatever. So what do? You want to go. You make them condition in between games, and you're thinking, okay, we're going to do this conditioning. That way, they won't be tired, won't be running out of gas when we get to the next games in the future. Get to the future games, and they are more gassed. So what do? You double down on the conditioning. You go do more. Well, we didn't do enough. So we go and we double down on the conditioning. This makes it worse. And basically this will continue until one of two things happens. An injury is going to happen or the season ends, one or the other. If they make it through the season, then that's how it's going to end. So getting back to this, we're getting into the nuts and bolts now, okay? First gear over here, the red, or the brighter the red, the more explosive the movement. And explosive is what we want. You know that. We all agree on that. Fast twitch muscle fibers. That's what we want, okay? So, explosive movements, 15 seconds. Each one of those is a second. I mean, honestly, throwing a baseball as hard as possible and hitting a baseball as hard as possible wouldn't even get out of that first second right there, you know? But if you were to hit a double or something like that in a triple or even an inside the park home run, you're not really going to get outside of that. I've never hit an inside the park home run in my entire life, so I have no idea how long it takes to do that, but I would imagine it's not much more than 15 seconds. So that's where baseball is exclusively played, okay? Now, you take them, what you're looking at when you're watching them in a game, everything that you are seeing them do in that game, and you're thinking to yourself, they're not conditioned enough, is happening in this dark red zone. Then you take them out and you go, okay, we're going to condition more, and you are putting them in this zone right here. A little bit of that second gear, but mostly this one right here. And hear this. This is the most important part. If your body could talk, if their bodies could talk, after all of this conditioning over here, all this conditioning, when they get back to a baseball game over here, their bodies would tell you they have absolutely, that their bodies have no clue that you have done any conditioning whatsoever to help them perform things in this gear. Your body would, if it could talk, it would say, why were you doing all this over here? Like, I had no idea that I thought we were preparing for a marathon. I thought we were preparing for a 5K. I thought we were preparing for cross country. Why did you do that? This would be what, if you've watched my video on shock injuries, this is another reason that it's looking so sloppy, is because you're getting back to the game and it is a total shock to the body. Actually, your body wouldn't know what baseball was because you wouldn't communicate to it. It would get to the game and it would be like, what was that? Why have we not been doing explosive movements? And then we suddenly went out and did explosive movements. We've been doing all this all this steady state cardio over here. What was this? When did we start doing this again? And that's the truth. That's why, like, the conditioning over here, it doesn't even exist to the body as far as like making it better at first gear. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Basically what the analogy that I would use for that, the best analogy for that is that you're a boxer and you're preparing for a fight. You're an MMA fighter and you're preparing by shooting layups, like practicing your layups or taking infield drills. Like, it's two different things. It's apples and oranges. It doesn't work. What you've got to do to really get your mind wrapped around this, you got to back away from the game of baseball or softball or whatever sport. Look at the game and how it's played over the course of a game and break it down into explosive and regulated breathing events, okay? These are terms that I came up with. An explosive event, don't think about the game and all of the nuances you already know about. Just look at it from an energy expenditure standpoint. And more importantly, what follows that energy expenditure. Explosive event is a movement in which maximum force, speed, power is applied for a short burst of time, 10 to 15 seconds max. Importantly to understand, a regulated breathing event, RBE, is the time following an explosive event in which the athlete catches their breath. And that is super important because when you get down to it, this is what regulates what gear the body is in. And remember, you never leave first gear in the game of baseball. The only way, in order to leave first gear in the game of baseball, the athlete would basically have to get done doing whatever they're going to do that pertains to the game and continue to jog around the field until it's time to go out in the field and then do jumping jacks while they're in the field to keep their heart rate elevated the entire time. That's the only way that your conditioning would carry over to the game of baseball, okay, or softball. They're synonymous to me. So anyways, regulated breathing events. Okay, this is the best graphic I could come up with. It makes sense to me. Hopefully it makes sense to you. The red represents an explosive event. The green represents the regulated breathing events. And this is the way that I would see a timeline of a baseball game going. So the pitchers, there's a rhythm to it. You've got the red is a pitch. The time in, what's that stupid pitch clock the SEC's using? It's like 20 seconds. So 15 seconds, sometimes more. But you get what I'm saying. Like that's a very the green is that time in between pitches. It'd be a little longer when there's a hit or you strike the guy out or whatever. But you get what I'm saying. There's way more time to catch your breath rather than, obviously you don't even get out of breath throwing a pitch. So, but even if you did, there's a ton of time to catch your breath after each one of those explosive movements. And then for hitters, hypothetically speaking, if you were a hitter, you could technically, if the ball never came to you in the field or you're a DH, you could literally go an entire game without an explosive event, because if you go up there and you looked at 3 pitches at every one of your at-bats and go back, like the only thing explosive is going to be the bus ride home after you do something like that. So it's much more sporadic and the green would be more sporadic, but you get what I'm saying. There's more time, even more time of downtime regulated breathing event after explosive movements if you're a hitter. But so here's what you need to get, and this is one of those things. It's like don't shoot the messenger. I mean, I'm just trying to help, but one of these things is not like the other. Okay? Okay? Foul poles. There's no red. You gotta have red. Okay? And hopefully nobody watching this still thinks you're flushing lactic acid with foul pole runs. Like, no, that doesn't happen anymore, right? Okay. All right, so 300-yard shuttles. I absolutely despise 300-yard shuttles. There's no, it is completely pointless. And I was being very, very generous with these green blips right here. Because really and truly, there's not an RBE when you're doing 300-yard shuttles. You just usually, because what happens is it's 150 yards, and then you get a little bit of time, not nearly enough time to recover, and then you got to run another 150 yards. And so that technically should be pink. There is no regulated breathing event there. So again, nothing. One of these things is not like the other. Timed miles, ridiculously stupid. Okay, the only one of the things that I see, and remember, let me go back and just let me time out real quick. Remember, I've said this a million times, and I'll say it a million times more. If I were to come out and run a practice for you, if you're a coach watching this, if I were to come out and run a practice for you and you watched me, you would be like, what is he doing? And that's really just what happens when I see the training programs. I know the guys are doing their best. I'm trying to help. I have some fun, probably too much, and get a little irritated with stuff. But, so anyways, time back in on that. Imposter sprints. That's another term that I've come up with. So these are the ones that are semi-noble. I kind of understand how it happened. The rest of them, I have no idea how that happened. I don't know how anybody thought that was a good idea. Imposter sprints are when you take, these are the coaches that have said, yeah, sprinting, you're right, duh. That's way better than any of this stuff for baseball. And so you go out, you set up where your guys are going to sprint. But where you kind of drop the ball is, because I'm a coach, I recognize this. You're a coach, I know what it is. You die inside a little bit when they're standing still. It drives you crazy, right? Well, remember the regulated breathing event. If there is no regulated breathing event, then the body will continue to climb into those next gears that you do not use in baseball or any other sport that anybody cares about, right? So I shouldn't say that. Any other sport that I have anything to do with, that involves explosive movement. So imposter sprints, I have these asterisks here because that's where there should be green. But because they're sprinting 30 yards or 40 yards, or hopefully not more than that, but they're sprinting, however long, and if it takes 5 seconds to do that sprint, they're only being given 5 seconds to rest. That's ending up, you're ending up with the exact same results as these because they're not being given an RBE. So you don't have to give them a ton of time. If whatever they're doing, just time it. If they're going, if the sprint they're doing takes 10 seconds, which that's too long, just telling you that's too long. You're not really getting anything out of it. I would keep it at 5 seconds. So if they're going 5 second sprints as hard as they can, 40 yards, however, it'd take me 45 seconds longer than that to run 40 yards, but they could probably run about, we'll say 5 seconds for easy math. You need to give them double or even triple the amount of time to rest before they run again. And that will, believe me, you get to the end of the day, they will be crushed, you will be happy, and you conditioned their first gear very well like that, okay? So be careful with that. You're basically, even though you are, once they get out here into these multiple sprints, when you've had asterisks instead of green for their resting events, you're getting into the same area as this up here. So, it's not, it's kind of fool's gold. So just be careful with that. It all comes down to the RBE. That's the hardest part because, let's face it, you're judging the conditioning by their level of misery. The easiest way to increase the misery is no rest, right? That is a very simple way to make anybody miserable if you're exercising. If you are training for a CrossFit event, cross country, you're training for things like that, yeah, there's the RBE. Yeah, there are times that the RBE does need to be very, very short. But if you are training for the game of baseball to be explosive as possible in singular movements, there's got to be an extended RBE there. How do we condition? That's the question. So what do I do? Are you sitting down? You think you can handle this? Okay. Love y'all, but you let them catch their breath. I know you're like, no, that's the only way. It's the only way, man. And remember, they catch their breath in a baseball game. They catch their breath in a softball game. Yeah, you let them catch their breath the way they do in a baseball game. Okay, so asking you a question, see what you think. I realize I had a high school coach tell me one time that the only thing I do fast is eat, and he was not wrong. So you can have fun at my expense. I know I'm slow, but it is what it is. Which one of these? Think about traditional, typical conditioning methods, the 300-yard shuttle, all that other crap, and then watch this and my energy expenditure and the RBE that follows. Tell me which one represents the game of baseball. Now remember, even though it doesn't look like it, I am mustering all the might I can in these sprints, okay? I am running as fast as I can. So, I mean, and that's still, you know, it's a 2-second, 10-yard sprint. I'm 42 years old, and I wasn't fast when I was 18. So, you know, I'll take it. But just think about it. I just had an explosive event, and now my RBE is happening. It's a little bit longer. I timed it. It's about 30 seconds in between each sprint. So, if I was a pitcher, then, technically that's longer than I would get in a game, but like I'm also sprinting a lot farther, and my EE is farther or longer in duration than throwing a ball. So that would probably even out pretty well. I'm keeping my body in first gear with this type of conditioning right here. Okay. The first gear is being well conditioned. I'm not right now I'm letting my body get back down, and it's regulating back down and staying in first gear. This is not something for beginners, obviously, but when you've got guys that have been deadlifting for a long time, they understand how the deadlift works. I think this one is phenomenal. That is a much better version, accomplishing the exact same thing in this that you are in a power clean, with way less technical stuff going on. Just a lot better work, honestly. A lot easier to set up, a lot easier to do. The rate of force development is being built. Explosiveness, and there's an RBE. If I truly was wanting to condition, if you think about this, and I don't really think anybody will actually do this, but think about traditional conditioning methods, all the stuff we've used. Then think about this: if you truly were like a maniac about it, you could what if you took a pitcher and you had them do one rep of that every 15 seconds for like 15 reps, and then took a 5-minute break, and then repeated that like 7 times if it's a high school pitcher? Would that not be the most well-conditioned pitcher to go a complete game of any pitcher? Food for thought, something to think about. I would say yes. I feel that would be the most accurate way to condition a pitcher and make them to where they're still throwing as hard as they did in the first inning, they're throwing in the 7th inning as hard as they were in the first, okay, to where they never run out of gas. I would argue that would be the most well-conditioned pitcher that you would run across. Okay, so the timed pop-up sprint, I absolutely love this. See, so I'm timing this right here. This is one of those ways that you get the absolute best. That's the other part about this, and why the traditional conditioning methods don't work, is because you don't get maximum effort. Maximum effort is everything in baseball. It's practically one long string of 1-rep maxes. I am timing him because he is competing. Obviously, if you know Logan, there's nobody in this gym or at that point in time, there wasn't anybody in this gym that could race him. So we would use times for him to compete against himself, and we could look back and be like, what was your time on the pop-up sprint last time? And that way he's got something that he is trying to beat every single time he runs that sprint. If you just tell him to do a pop-up sprint, even if you've got that guy that kind of gets it and he goes hard, he's still going to go harder when he's competing against somebody else or against the stopwatch. I appreciate you guys watching, and we'll see you in the next one.